Hello everyone, my name is Ashley and today we're going to talk about sensory processing disorder. I wanted to provide just a disclaimer. This information was created for educational purposes only. It's not created to inquire therapy-related services or provide diagnosis. If you feel that any of this information being discussed relates to your child and creates concern, please contact your healthcare provider. This presentation will discuss what is sensory processing disorder, why is it important, what does it involve, what does it look like in a child who has challenges with their senses, activities to promote these challenges, how is it diagnosed, and how does occupational therapy help. The first area we'll discuss is what is sensory processing disorder. Sensory processing is when the brain is having difficulty taking in, organizing, and using sensory information, causing a person to have problems interacting effectively in the everyday environment. I wanted to break it down just a little further, so here's what happens. The central nervous system may not receive or detect sensory information, and the brain may not integrate, modulate, organize, and discriminate sensory information efficiently. So this means that it's not bringing all the information together in order to understand one's environment and where you are at in that environment. It is unable to regulate and perceive the intensity, duration, and location of the sensory input. So this disorganized brain may send out inaccurate messages to direct the child's actions. So deprived of the accurate feedback, the child needs to behave in a purposeful way. And then that may lead to problems in looking and listening, paying attention, interacting with people and objects, processing new information, remembering, and learning. But why is sensory processing important? So sensory processing impacts everyday functionings, including body awareness, higher level cognitive functioning, motor planning, postural stability, speech and language skills. So as a child is exposed to various sensory inputs, they gradually learn to organize them within their brain and are able to give meaning to them. By organizing sensations, the child is able to modulate their response, and as a result, they seem to be more connected with the world and in control of their emotions. When children are efficient in their processing, appropriate responses to the environment around us occurs and is demonstrated by appropriate skill mastery, behavior, attention, and self-regulation. Children are able to sit and attend to important pieces of information in the classroom and therefore will have a good chance at achieving their academic potential. A child will be able to understand their body's movement in relation to their surroundings and itself, and this allows for success in fine motor and gross motor skills. This in turn aids in the social development of a child. What does sensory processing involve? So it's not just one thing. Sensory processing disorder has three different subtypes. The first is sensory modulation disorder, which is how we make sense of the physical world and how we place ourselves within that world by using our senses. It is how our body and brain regulate the intensity of the sensory input in our environment. It is like being able to block out a noise and focus on a targeted voice in a busy room. The next is sensory discrimination disorder. This is the brain's ability to interpret information and disregard irrelevant information. The brain sometimes jumbles or confuses environmental stimuli and is unable to tell the difference among and between different stimuli and how we perceive the intensity, duration, and location of the sensory input. Each of the senses has their own discrimination disorder, and a child with this subtype can have any combination of all the senses. Lastly is sensory-based motor disorder. Normally the brain receives sensory messages or sensory input and produces an adaptive response or motor output. When a child suffers from sensory-based motor disorder, they respond incorrectly to the surrounding environment, whether it's by understanding the space around them or the inability to move the body in the right way, and this can be identified as dyspraxia or postural disorder. So this presentation today will be focusing on sensory modulation disorder and sensory discrimination disorder. Sensory modulation disorder can be broken down into over-responsiveness and under-responsiveness. So over-responsiveness is an exaggerated response of the nervous system to sensory input. The nervous system goes into fight or flight mode even when there is no danger. So a child typically is moody, fussy, or picky eaters, dislikes typical grooming habits, certain textures or messy play, and they may become overwhelmed by a busy environment. This is also linked with sensory avoiding behaviors because they are receiving too much input and they do not want to feel those senses and typically avoid them. Under-responsiveness is a lack of insufficient response to the sensory environment. A child needs alerting forms of sensory input. So children with under-responsiveness have slow or delayed responses to sound, sight, or touch. They may not notice a messy face. They may exhibit high pain tolerance. They can be clumsy, have low tone, or appear to be daydreaming. This also linked to sensory seeking behaviors. So they love to move and are constantly on the go. They roughhouse, they touch everything, they crash into things, or thrive in a busy environment. For sensory discrimination disorder, it can be broken down into quality of sensations, similarities of sensations, and differences in sensations. So the quality of the sensation is like, how fast am I moving? Where am I? Is my voice loud? Are my shoes tight on my feet? Is this bucket heavy? Is the snow cold? And then similarities in sensations. Have I heard this song before? Is my arm stretched as high as my left? Does my rabbit feel like my cat? And differences in sensations. Is the sound I hear cot or cog? Is the symbol a stop sign or a yield sign? And which train is moving? The one that I'm in or the one that is in the next track? So unlike over-responsiveness and under-responsiveness, discrimination disorders are harder to pinpoint and are frequently misdiagnosed due to behavior problems associated with school. However, there are many ways to help your child during this time, such as signing them up for occupational therapy to get the support that they need. Next, we'll talk about what challenges look like in children and activities to support these challenges. So the first sense we'll talk about is tactile sense. So tactile sense provides information primarily through the surface of our skin from head to toe about texture, shape, and size of the objects in the environment. It tells us whether we are actively touching something or passively being touched. It helps us distinguish between threatening and non-threatening touch senses and plays a major role in determining physical, mental, and emotional human behaviors. So a child that has over-responsive tactile sense has the tendency to respond negatively and emotionally to unexpected light and anticipated touch. They instantly and intensely exhibit the fight or fright or flight or freeze response to harmless sensations. They dislike messy activities or are avoidant of textures of food. They prefer wearing long sleeves and pants, even in the summer, or they dress lightly in the winter. They dislike swimming, bathing, brushing their teeth, or having their hair cut. An under-responsive child does not respond to touch effectively and seems unaware of touch unless it's intense, and they don't recognize pain, so they may unintentionally hurt others or animals because they do not feel the same sensation of pain as other people do. They disregard if their clothes are wrong or if their face or nose is messy. They may overstuff their mouth with food, and they don't realize when they drop something on the ground and they're unaware of personal space. For discrimination disorder, the child may seem out of touch with their hands. They may use them as if they were unfamiliar appendages. They have difficulty identifying what they touch through feeling it. They have trouble holding and using tools such as pencil, scissors, fork, and they're unable to perceive object properties such as texture, shape, size, and density. And they need their vision to identify body parts or familiar objects. So some activities to support your child with tactile sense is there's an activity called Rub-a-Dub-Dub. So encourage your child to rub a variety of textures against their skin. You can offer different kinds of soap and scrubbers when they're taking a bath, just to get all those different types of feelings to improve that tactile sense. You can also do water play, so you can either fill your kitchen sink up with sudsy water or a bucket and have them play outside. But you can put unbreakable objects in there, such as pitchers, bottles, turkey baster, sponges, toys, and have them feel them and try to identify what they are. You can also do, can you describe it? So you're providing objects with different textures, temperatures, and weights. Then you ask them to tell you about the object without looking at it. So is it round, smooth, cool, soft, or heavy? So depending on the child's skill level, you may have to work on the descriptors prior to doing this activity to help them identify what they're actually feeling. Next, we'll talk about the vestibular sense, which provides information through the inner ear about gravity and space, balance and movement, and about our head and body position in relation to the surface of the earth. This system influences balance, muscle tone, bilateral coordination, ocular movements, levels of arousal, speech and language development, and gross and fine motor skills. It also tells us if we are upright, upside down, at a tilt, or whether we are moving or standing still. So a child with an over-responsive vestibular sense may overreact negatively and emotionally to ordinary movement. They may dislike physical activity such as running, biking, sledding, or dancing. They may be cautious or slow-moving and sedentary. They may be hesitant to take a risk. They may be uncomfortable with stairs or cling to walls or banisters for support. They may feel sick when riding in a car, airplane, or elevator, and they have a great fear of falling. So a child with under-responsive vestibular sense does not respond negatively, they just simply don't notice. So when they were a baby, they were identified as such an easy baby. They were always ready to curl up in anyone's arms, and they're always ready to take a nap. They seem to lack that inner drive to move actively, and they do not notice sensations of falling or being off balance, and they're not able to protect themselves. So they may crave movement and seem to be in constant motion. They have poor balance, and they may bump into things. So a child with discrimination disorder fall frequently off their seat while moving or standing. They may become easily confused when turning or changing directions, and they're unable to tell when they've had enough swinging and may become sick. Some activities to support vestibular sense. So swinging is great. Encourage your child to swing. Never force them. You can do gentle linear movement that's calming, or if they need that more high intensity, they can have the fast, high swinging. If the child has a gravitational insecurity, you can start slow and swing so their feet touch the ground, or you can have your child sit on your lap. Another good way is using a T stool. So it's just like a piece of wood that's in the shape of the T. The bottom of the T would be on the ground and the child would sit on the top of the T. And this helps with balance, posture, attention, core stability. Is really helping them figure out where they are in space. You can also have your child spin. You can go to the park and have them spin on a tire swing or a merry-go-round, or indoors offer a swivel chair to sit and swim. Because a child may have difficulty discriminating, it is important to monitor the spinning, as a child may become easily overstimulated or even sick, and don't spin them without permission. The last one is tummy up or tummy down, head up. So this is having your child lie on their stomach on the floor and just rocking back and forth, and they can sing it to the song Row, Row, Row Your Boat, or draw on a piece of paper while listening to music, and bearing down in those arms to start connecting all that systems. The proprioceptive sense provides information through our muscles and joints. This input allows us to determine where each part of our body is in space, how fast it is moving, the direction in which it's moving, and the force of the motion. A child with poor proprioception may have trouble performing coordinated movements, grading movement, or muscle use. They may seek extra proprioceptive input by leaning, bumping, or crashing into things. So an over-responsive child may avoid stretching or contracting muscles. They may prefer not to move. They may become easily upset when they're passively moved. They may have poor body awareness and can be rigid, tense, and uncoordinated. They may be picky eaters due to that feeling of contracting and stretching the muscles when they're eating. And they may avoid running, hopping, jumping, crawling, and rolling. So an under-responsive child will lack that inner drive to move and play. They're usually clumsy with toys and materials, and they break toys easily. They're unable to orient their body to get dressed, and they may not notice that they've been sitting for a long time in an uncomfortable position, and they don't feel those pins and needles and may have a hard time standing up afterwards. For a child with discrimination, they may have poor body awareness and motor control, have difficulty planning and executing movement, have difficulty positioning their body to help with the coat or getting undressed. They have difficulty knowing where their body is in relation to other objects, so they're frequently falling, tripping, bumping into obstacles. Some activities to support proprioception would include any type of heavy work. So have your child pick up and carry soft drink bottles to a picnic, have them carry the laundry baskets upstairs or grocery bags filled with non-breakable items. They also can lug boxes of books around, buckets of blocks, pails of water, anything that's putting pressure on those joints to help them understand where their body is in space. So next you could do joint squeezes. So you can put one hand on your child's forearm and the other on their upper arm and slowly press towards and away from the elbow. And you can do this at the knee and shoulder. You can also straighten and bend their fingers, wrists, elbows, knees, ankles, and toes. And this provides compression and traction to the joints to calm and relax the child to help them figure out where they are in space. Another activity is hanging by the arms. So if you have a mount chinning bar in your doorway, or if you go to the park, you can use the monkey bars. But this allows the muscles to stretch and send sensory information back to the brain, and it also improves upper body strength. The visual sense is the input we get from our visual system that comes through the eyes. So an over-responsive child may react dramatically to benign environmental stimuli such as contrast, reflections, shiny surfaces, or bright lights. They may avoid bright light and sunlight. They may be uncomfortable or overwhelmed by moving objects or people. They may avoid direct eye contact, and they may experience headaches, nausea, and dizziness when using their eyes. An under-responsive child may not pay attention to novel visual stimuli, which includes like if you have holiday decorations up or if you rearranged your house or a classroom, they may not notice it. They're unaware of bright light or dark light. They're unaware of contrast, edges, and reflections. They may be unaware of movement and often bumping into moving objects. They may seek visual stimulations such as finger flicking, spinning, and peering at patterns and edges such as ceiling and fence lines. They may stare at objects or people without actually seeing them. For a child that has difficulty with discrimination, may be unable to recognize or read others' emotions. They may have difficulty recognizing letters or symbols. They may have difficulty with depth perception or figure ground perception. They may be unable to understand concepts such as up, down, back, forward, before, after, and for second. They may confuse likenesses and differences in pictures, and they may have difficulty remembering what they did or saw during the day. Some activities to support visual sense, mazes and dot to dots are great. You can draw mazes on a paper or the sidewalk or in the sand. And you can have them use their finger to follow the maze, or have them drive a car through the maze, or use crayon markers or chalks. So it's a great way for them to work on that fine motor skill, but also their visual sense as well. Making shapes, so let your child draw or form shapes, letters, numbers in different materials such as Play-Doh, finger paint, shaving cream, soap, foam, sand, clay, string, pudding, or pizza dough. Just having them be able to repeat those letters but in different materials. Tracking activities, have them lie on their back outside and watch birds or airplanes and only move their eyes while keeping their head still. You can also use a laser pointer in the house and point to different objects and have them follow the laser pointer. For the auditory sense, this is the input that comes through the ears. So difficulty processing auditory information may lead to difficulties with sound discrimination, phonemic awareness, articulation, auditory attention, memory, and sequencing. They may have selective listening or have difficulty understanding speech in the presence of background noise, and they may be oversensitive to certain sounds. So an over-responsive child may be on a constant alertness and must listen to every sound around them. They may become easily distracted or on edge, and it interferes with their learning and hampers language development and social interaction. They may be distressed by loud and sudden noises, high-pitched sounds, or even tiny or metallic sounds. And they may be distressed by sounds that don't normally bother others, like the toilet flushing, a distant church bell, or soft music. An under-responsive child may be unaware of sounds that others hear or listen to. So they do not visibly respond to quiet noises, soft voices, or whispers, and they do not respond to ordinary sounds, voices, questions, or comments, and they may seek sounds that are loud or annoying to others, but they're comfortable with them. A child with poor discrimination may be mislabeled with ADHD or disciplined for never listening because they appear to ignore what is said to them. They may have difficulty knowing the difference between background noise and the teacher's prompts, or being able to locate or recognize a sound. They may have difficulty recalling, repeating, or referring to words, phrases, conversations, or instructions. And they may have a poor sense of timing and rhythm when clapping, marching, singing, jumping the rope, or playing instruments. Some activities to support auditory sense. So just simplify the language, speak slowly, shorten your comments, abbreviate instructions, and repeat what you said. Reinforce verbal messages with gestural communication such as facial expressions, hand movements, and body language. Talk to your child while dressing, eating, or bathing to teach words and concepts such as nouns, body parts, prepositions, adjective, time, action, and even emotions. You can also use rhythm and beat to improve the child's memory. So using nursing rhymes or creating sounds and having your child repeat those sounds. And a great way is just reading to your child as well. Next is olfactory, or our smell sense. While we perceive smell to be a very simple process, there are many chemicals and physical things going on in our body to make it happen. For a child that has over-responsiveness to smell, they may have strong reactions to different smells. They may refuse to eat certain foods or be in a room where that food is being eaten, and they may decide whether they like or dislike a person based on their smell. For a child that has under-responsive to smell, doesn't seem to notice drastic changes in smells, and they may habitually smell objects with strong odors, such as soap, markers, clothing, flowers, and gasoline. For a child that has poor discrimination, they cannot tell that the bread is burning, but they have a general sense that something is wrong, and they do not recognize familiar smells such as a coffee shop or grandma's perfume, and they're unable to discriminate between certain smells. Lastly, we have the gustatory or taste sense, which enables us to be aware of the flavors of food we are eating. If you've tasted it, the gustatory system was responsible for that, with some help from the olfactory or smell system. So we get this input through our taste buds on our tongue. Many children crave or avoid certain foods, and many of these preferences are driven by the texture of the food more than the taste. So a child that's over-responsive will identify by taste of food, texture of food, and temperature of food. So they may refuse strongly flavored foods or specific flavors, refusal of soft textures or dry or crunchy textures. They may be unable to tolerate different foods touching on a plate, and they may gag often when eating. A child that's under-responsive may seek out strong flavors to enhance registration of tastes. They may prefer very spicy or very hot foods, and they may even eat non-food items because of the crunchy or soft texture. This behavior is called pica, and it can be very dangerous if the child eats toxic items or objects which cause a choking hazard. The student may be eating non-food items because they like the crunchy, soft texture. Alternative, they may be seeking just strong flavors such as paint or glue. So a way to address this is to teach the student to discriminate between edible and non-edible items. You can do this by having boxes that one is green and red, and each time the student tries to eat a non-edible item, direct the student to place that object into the red box. So this box would be the no or stop sign box. A child that has difficulty with discrimination will have difficulty telling the difference between different foods and may choose to reject food based on the way it looks. So some activities to support olfactory and gustatory sense. So you can do a smell and tell activity, which you can use note cards and scented glue to write letters or numbers on the card. Have them touch it, sniff it, and read the card. So by touching and seeing the scented numbers on the letters on the card integrates that tactile and visual sensations with smells, thereby increasing their memory, attention, and association. Another one is taste and tell. So if you can set bits of food on a large plate so the child can see them distinctively, and so the flavors stay separate. And then tasting different foods improves that gustatory and olfactory discrimination, and putting food in the mouth promotes that tactile discrimination. Let us eat. Have the child grow their own lettuce and create their own salad dressings. By smelling and tasting these different dressings can promote discrimination, and then growing lettuce and preparing the dressing provides that tactile and visual input. So this is their hard work to create these projects, so they may be more eager to try something new. So how is sensory processing disorder diagnosed? So there is no formal diagnosis for sensory processing disorder, although you may hear that the child is having trouble processing sensory information. So occupational therapists are often qualified to identify and create a treatment plan for children who have sensory challenges, but other professionals can identify as well, such as pediatricians, developmental behavioral pediatricians, psychologists, and school evaluators. The last thing I want to cover is how occupational therapy services assist children with sensory processing disorder. Occupational therapy services can assist with sensory processing disorder by expanding the child's abilities and actively working on broadening their skills. They can create a sensory diet to provide sensory feedback to the body to help it regulate. They can provide education to enhance the child's efficient and appropriate response to sensory stimulation. They are able to recognize triggers and can educate parents and caregivers of those triggers that spark inappropriate sensory reactions. They can improve parent and caregiver knowledge on how to reduce the environmental factors that contribute to sensory issues. They can provide the alert or engine program to promote self-regulation through sensory and cognitive strategies. They can implement the MORE program, which uses motor components, oral organization, respiratory demands, and eye contact to assist with sensory regulation. They can utilize the Wilbarger protocol, which is a deep pressure proprioceptive technique that is designed to reduce sensory or tactile defensiveness and assist with self-regulation. They can develop social stories to help children understand routines and how to respond in certain situations. They can address physical skills by developing strength and coordination to enable a child to participate in activities which can support social interaction. They can provide additional support in the transition into school and work with the teachers as needed. And they can provide behavior management and teach families how to use a consistent approach to manage a child's behavior. Because sensory processing disorder is very complex, occupational therapists can identify and address the specific challenges each child has to support their function in everyday life. Here are some resources that I use throughout this program and that provide great information on the topics that we discussed today. And that is all I have. Thank you.